In terms of what might be a catalyst for a coal price increase, would be something like the emergence of Indian coal demand. There's a lot of the Indian power producers. You just have to read most analyst reports and they just tell you about the massive demand required in India over the next 20 years. And otherwise you get some sort of black swan event like we saw in the Japanese tsunami in March 2011, where unfortunate circumstances created a spike in coal because the government policy was to veer away from nuclear, so coal was a substitute. Or as we saw in Queensland floods around the same time, the big floods in Queensland wiped out a lot of the coal production for that year, and there was a large spike in coal price. Okay, this is an interesting chart. Basically, most of the world's coal is traded by seaborne thermal coal, and this is the demand history. I think there's two things to note here. One, the traditional buyers of coal in Asia Pacific have been Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. And Japan, Korea, Taiwan do not have their own coal resources, or mostly energy resources. So they are definitely reliant on energy resources, whether that be gas, LNG, hydro, nuclear, or coal. And a large component is coal. So Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, when people ask me what do I think about demand, I always go back to the core fundamentals. And if this was a football game, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan would be in midfield. It'd be the center group that keeps the team together. And that's kind of your core demand, which is quite large, and you can see it increasing there. And then you've got the wingers, which could be the Indian demand side, which is the guy running up and down, and there's obviously, they can make a big impact on the game. And the big center forward is probably China, which is, depending on how good he or she is, if they score 5 goals in one game or no goals, you're not really sure. So with China, it is the big swing factor, I think, going forward in terms of future demand growth. But in the last few years, both China and India have actually grown 30 to 40+%, respectively. I mentioned the seaborne trade. Obviously, I believe that Asia is the solution. Most of the world's biggest seaborne coal trade happens in our region. The biggest exporters of thermal coal in the world are Indonesia first and Australia second. And they actually export coal into Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China, when China's importing, in places like India and Southeast Asia. So Asia is the nucleus for coal trade, so I think we're in the right postcode. Good place to list the coal company, given we're in the center of all the trade. Close to your markets, your resources are close to the market, and also the freight costs are quite low. And a quick one, always a debate, but coal is generally assumed to be easier and cheaper to ship than gas. With gas, you normally have to ship, this is for more than 5,000 kilometers. If it's a gas pipeline, it's kind of cheaper. But if you have to build LNG receiving or liquefaction terminals, these costs can come into billions of dollars. So on a dollars per gigajoule basis, coal is generally cheaper from a seaborne transport point of view. I mentioned this. If you look at this chart on the left, that's the thermal coal supply in 1995, and the one on the right was updated to 2013. You can see in 95, Indonesia was only 11% of the global market, and by last year, it's more than 40%. So Indonesia has really done well in this, supplying markets like China, India, Southeast Asia. They supply their own country as well. Indonesia's got a healthy demand for energy, including some domestic market obligations. So a lot of the coal in Indonesia is actually supplied now to power stations. So Indonesia has dominated the export growth, and we're right at the right position. Australia's followed. China has moved from a net exporter to a net importer, which will impact the price. Coal quality. I mentioned the quality before, and coals like lignite and lower subbituminous coals have probably got a lower energy value. They haven't been as popular, I guess, in the last 10 years, with the Japan, Korea, Taiwan always buying the higher quality coals and the coals with higher ranks in terms of energy and lower moisture. But now we're actually seeing a trend where there is a demand for some of these lower rank coals. And some of those traditional high rank users, like Japan, are starting to look at this type of coal. And this should benefit a lot of the Indonesian coal producers who have abundant low-rank coal, and hopefully they should gain in the long run.